Welcome to All Politics Are Local. Jesse Morehouse. Now,
Colonel.
the reason why I'm going to ask, should we call you Colonel Jesse Morehouse?
Yes, we should.
Because I didn't know this whole civilian.
I was raised by Marines.
Yes, he's Colonel.
Okay, so Colonel Jesse Morehouse.
Yes, he's Colonel.
You're on.
Yes.
Colonel, are you on?
Yeah, I am. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Colonel Jesse Morehouse, welcome to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you again, Jonathan, as well as you, Councilman Williams, and you, Zaid. It sounds like a real interesting group of people, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Now,
So before you start, Colonel, I'm just looking at your picture. So I'm thinking, names. The first thing I thought, Colonel Jessup, a few good men. So, and then the name Morehouse. I'm just like, you have a very strong name.
This is a diva vegetable.
Yeah, you have a very strong name there. So I look forward to having a great conversation with you as well, sir.
well, yeah, just in terms of some of his biography, like he literally jumps out of planes, he ran 100 miles, he climbs mountains for fun.
Rangers ain't
Like
no joke.
for fun.
Like he's that dude. You're like, wow. So part of the conversation came with us talking about complex problems. Can you tell us, like, what does it mean to solve complex problems, and what are these complex problems, especially in light of what you were doing in Iraq?
Sure. So I'll start off really quick with just a little bit of defining the words we're using, which is when it comes to when I was talking about complex problems, it was with the idea of the fact that problems present themselves. Problems are always something of some difficulty. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to scratch your head and take some time out of to actually address them. So you've got problems that range from simple problems to complex problems. And the differentiation to me is simple problems might be something like a light switch doesn't work. You might not understand electricity, but if the light switch doesn't work, there's only a few things that can be. You got to take a little time to solve it, but you'll probably get your light working again before too long. The next on this kind of scale would be complicated problems. So this would be something like your car is doing something funny. It's not something that someone who's not a professional mechanic could diagnose easily. But if you're a professional in a given realm, then figuring out the problem is relatively easy for you if it's in your realm of expertise. But to other people, it might look quite complicated or something that they couldn't solve on their own. And then you get to problems of complexity, and complex problems are difficult for anyone, even if you're an expert in the realm where they happen. And to me, these are the types of problems that typically you find in settings where you have lots of people involved, because people create more complex problems by all their interactions with each other, and also where many entities are all interacting, all with their own different interests and goals. And so
now, to make this more like when you're talking about complex problems and problems involving people, it might help to say what the context of the military was and why they even had to deal with this to begin with. Like, why was the military even worried about complex problems? Because it seems like, well, the military, you get a mission, you go, you blow something up, and it's gone, and you're good, right?
Right. Well, and if you're talking about at a smaller unit level, that's exactly what somebody in the military might do. And remember that there's many things that the military does. It might be to go out and provide medical aid to children.
Build a bridge.
Yeah, to build a bridge. It might be to blow something up. There's many different things it might do. But the reason the military is so focused on complexity is because when you back up to like the 1,000-foot level, and you look at something, and remember that what I'm going to speak to is missions given the military by the government. So you might have your own opinion about whether the mission was a good one to be given to the military. The important thing here is to focus on the mission that was assigned to it, and as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, the military is going to do it, right? So, for instance, if you say, "Hey, I need you to create some type of a stable government environment in Afghanistan," well, that is complex, right? And it's complex because of all the different groups with all the different interests, with all the different histories that are all maybe trying to achieve different, are definitely trying to achieve different things. And you're going in with your own goals, trying to find ways of moving towards your own goals in that situation. So,
and just for clarification, like, I would never think that the military was. I would think the State Department would be that. I would think that like there was, we're talking about stabilizing Afghanistan or stabilizing Iraq. Wouldn't that be for civilians? Are you telling me that was an actual military mission?
So that delineation of whose responsibilities or whose is something that I think there's a very lively debate about where that responsibility should rest, and I think it changes depending on administration and also sometimes just on the pragmatics of who, like for instance, the United States military just is funded at a much higher level and has many more people, and sometimes it's because of that. While maybe it's a solution that is that people kind of raises their eyebrow, it might, from a pragmatic point, be the quickest way to get to the desired goal. So that's probably a discussion for another time, though, and probably one to have with people much higher up in government than a lowly colonel like me, though.
Well, the question was more like, is that something realistic? In other words, did the military have to learn how to deal with complex problems? Because they did have to like stabilize Afghanistan or Iraq.
Yeah. So the military has, and that's a very high level example. And I just mentioned that because that's one that might make a lot of sense to people who have watched the news and things like that. But the military deals with complexity at many different levels. But definitely when you're looking at where, so when you think about military operations are a tool available to a government to try to achieve its desired goals or move closer to them in the world. A government could also use economic means, diplomatic means, or informational means. Those are typically the four biggies. And they're usually described as what's called DIME: diplomatic, information, military, and economic, are the four big tools any government has to try to achieve national, or to move closer towards achieving national interests. So, for instance, for the United States, no matter what president is in charge, you'll always see that in some way, shape, or form they're talking about the security of the United States and its citizens, economic prosperity for us and our allies, something along those lines, and something about spreading democratic values or something. And it's always rephrased a little bit with a slightly different emphasis between presidents, but it's always those things. And so to achieve those, the military is one of the tools used to do it. So when the military is called upon to do it, they need to, they're given a mission in that. Then they're looking at how to achieve that mission. And typically it's, when you're talking at that geopolitical level, that big level, there's a term that's used to describe complexity, but it could also apply to a community activist when they're looking at a situation that they're trying to figure out just how challenging is it going to be to make progress in this situation. And this complexity test that the military uses is given an acronym as well, because we love acronyms, as I'm sure Councilwoman Williams might know from her time in the service. The name is VUCA, VUCA, which doesn't roll off the tongue that well, but it stands for four things: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And when those four things are present in any environment, you can guarantee that you're trying to make headway in a complex environment. So if the speed of change, volatility is typically seen as the nature and the speed of change. Uncertainty is a lack of predictability. Complexity in the context of VUCA is a difficulty finding cause and effect chains. And then ambiguity means that there's mixed meanings of many different things that you're dealing with. And it also means that often you're not going to find any one right answer. So the so the military, when it, when you identify an environment as being an environment where this can be super challenging to work in, you look for those factors of VUCA, and when you find them, you say, yeah, we should expect this to be a hard environment to work in. And that's where this whole idea of, I use the word complexity initially, but then I typically like to resort to the word, or to the acronym of VUCA afterwards to help kind of better describe what I meant by the term complexity. It's really a component of this thing called VUCA.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
yeah.
and so, and well, I will let you,
that going around.
Mm-hmm.
and I'll let you continue with, and also just, if you can give us examples of this as well as we go along.
Yeah, so some, some examples that I've thrown out before to help people kind of put this in context would be things like, for me, a great example of it was when we were looking at the housing bubble, and we all remember that, and I don't think anyone remembers it with any joy.
Right.
But you look at what led up to it. Well, there was a relaxation of banking regulations, right? Which allowed some bankers to invent techniques to get rid of risk from their balance sheets, so they didn't have to deal with any negative consequences for these risky things that they were doing. And then the government had monetaries in effect that kept interest rates low, and it created this environment where credit standards, reasonable credit standards like those that we grew up with, where you had to really prove that you were creditworthy to get a loan, those types of norms just went away. And then borrowers, of course, didn't realize what was going on and gleefully borrowed more money, even though it was a terrible idea. And suddenly there was this huge drop in housing prices. And people were even, if you remember, people were even saying, hey, we're in a bubble, it's going to burst at some point. And it was just kind of one of those news clips that you did. You were like, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly the entire worldwide economic system took a nosedive, right?
It was about to be in a whole worldwide collapse.
New Jersey's still number one in foreclosure.
That's right.
Both sides, right.
Yeah, and so so that's a great example of something that happened in a complex environment, and no one had any idea how each of those little things, how they were going to all add up and create this terrible thing that led to worldwide negative economic effects. So that's just an example. But so you see it in business, you see it in the geopolitical realm. I even, in my research on this topic, I came across the fact that there's actually a group that teaches a class in complexity theory for people engaging in social justice movements to try to help folks understand that this applies even if you're dealing with social justice. It's everywhere, right? Complexity is the name of the game when you're talking about any environment where you find volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So to me, it's politics. Politics being a great example. Yeah, and so the reason I think it's important to start with that is that, okay, so complexity, it's the name of the game in many of the things that, at least from the little bit of research I've been able to do on what Councilman Williams and Zaid kind of engage in their professions. And so it's these are complex things we're talking about. And so with that groundwork laid, the thing I really like to move to is the idea that in complex or in VUCA environments, where the types of problems you encounter actually have a name, and the name for the problems you encounter are wicked problems, and it's a great name. It was a term coined back in the 70s by a guy or two guys, I think it was city planning in Los Angeles, and they really just articulated some of the things about the challenges that you find when you're dealing with problems in a VUCA environment. And so their definition of a wicked problem is that it's hard, maybe impossible, to claim success with wicked problems. They tend to bleed into another problem. As you solve something, it just morphs and becomes something else. And approaches to wicked problems can improve a situation, but there's no solving it. And there's no template to follow. Every situation is unique and must be treated as such. And there's always more than one explanation. Every wicked problem is the symptom of another problem, and any solution that you attempt changes the nature of the problem over time, and it morphs. And to me, it's like none of that's supposed to be like a downer or something really depressing. It's just supposed to be like, okay, yeah, like we've all seen problems like that in the realms that we work in, right? Is as we work on it, it morphs and changes, and it's nice to just have a name to it and say, yeah, I understand why there is no end of the day, what I call like a fairy tale ending where everyone lives happily ever after. You know, it's if you understand that from the beginning, it's great because you can set expectations and you can work very pragmatically at what's important, which is making things better, right?
So we're looking at
something in your control.
So if we're looking at issues like police brutality, poverty, we're looking at issues of equitable, lead water crisis, right? We're looking at right. If we're looking at
you said LA, so I thought of Skid Row. Or down to LA, the city.
The homelessness problem.
Exactly.
Right. Like that's there in LA right now. Like so it seems like there's so many of these different social problems that it seems like they seem intractable. Like a community violence, right? Like when we were dealing with that. We have the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, and actually they're the group that I thought about first when talking to you. Because it seems like that is right, because Zaid Mohammed is part of the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, right? Like, so it seems like these are the types of problems that you're talking about that seem intractable. It seems like when you do one thing, like, the 1994 crime bill, let's go and, deal with this into the law enforcement issue, and you created the prison industrial complex. So how would we deal with policies and problems as to not make it worse? Like, what is some of the thinking behind it? Like, is there any thinking that you can offer that would have prevented us from adopting the 1994 crime bill to deal with the problem of crime and drugs within urban areas? Solution.
I think that, so that's a really good question. Is you can definitely see what happens. When I think there's one of the pitfalls with wicked problems is when you go for like the silver bullet solution, right? You try to do one thing, and that one thing might present well or sell well, but it might not necessarily get you what you want. And the typical approach that's used in the military to deal with attacking problems in a VUCA environment, these wicked problems, is a multi-pronged strategy where what you do is that you know that the problem is tough, and you also part of it is saying, I understand that I might not fully understand the problem. So how do you move forward on it? Well, the way you do that is diversity, and so you need to assemble a diverse team of people with many different viewpoints. And then what you need to do, and they need to be creative people and hopefully hardworking and committed. And what you do is you try to develop what we call lines of effort. And so lines of effort are different conceptual approaches to making positive improvements on the problem. And this is something I know, Jonathan, you and I talked about in great detail.
And you had like graphs and you were drawing lines and
So a lot of times, like your idea of lines of effort is the thing that can truly encapsulate what you're doing in a way that you can put this up on a wall or on a poster, and you can just show this one thing and show people what you're doing. And it typically has, somewhere between like 3 to 7 lines of effort. I think 7's a lot. 5, like 3 to maybe 5 is maybe a good ideal to shoot for. And so if you can picture it like 5 different general approaches you're going to take to solving the problem, which could be things like one of those approaches could be like grassroots engagement for messaging or something like that, and one of those could be like law enforcement officer training, and then another. And so you kind of see how they're phrased. They're kind of big. It definitely says like this is going to be the focus of what we're doing, but it doesn't get too specific, right? So you come up with a variety of those, and the important thing is you need a variety because you don't know which ones are going to end up being the ones that move you the furthest. So you got to have some variety.
Because it makes it. As you talk, Colonel, it reminds me of a book I read, and I think it was around. Let's think of Times Square, like 42nd Street. Before 42nd Street was like it was. It was pretty much like a drug haven,
right?
And how they applied to clean this area up, but it was from a time where they were treating the heroin epidemic. And this book spoke, I think, before Giuliani was mayor, he may have worked, what capacity he worked in, but they gave him this plan, and it was like first offer the people treatment. And he's like, okay, Jade in the back. He's like, first offer them treatment. And then everybody that didn't take the treatment, then they went to their families and said, your family member is addicted to drugs. We need you to bring them into treatment. So first they went to the person himself, and if they didn't come into treatment, then they said, we need you to bring them into treatment. Sure. So first you had the people that turned themselves into treatment themselves, and then they went to the family members. And then the next prong was that though everybody else was left, then it went to a punitive. Okay, you didn't turn yourself in. If we find you out here getting high or something like that, now we're going to lock you up. But at first it was like you can get help. And then it was like your family members help them get help. And then everybody else, it became punitive.
And that might be considered like one line, because that one line is focused on the individual and their family.
Right.
And so we're gonna have this step for the individual and their family. And another thing might be to, interdiction to make sure the price of heroin goes up, to make it less affordable. Is that really what you're talking about? Like different?
Yeah. You're definitely on it with that idea of the diverse approaches for sure. And then and I think that the idea of like how to address. So one of the things I was going to say is that then those lines of effort within each one, then you get very specific with specific things that support that line of effort. And I think that that's definitely along the lines of that idea of, hey, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this other thing, all with, like, let's say that line of effort was get treatment for addicts, and so it's voluntary, peer pressure, family pressure, and then legal means within it. And so what you do is within that line of effort, you're going to have things sequentially in it that build upon each other, and also some things that work in parallel. But one of the important things to do is, like, once you develop those lines of effort, you're developing them ideally with all the stakeholders you can from many different organizations and perspectives. And the more inclusive you can be, especially getting people in the room who flat out disagree with each other, if they can get in the room civilly, it's going to be much more productive and powerful than if it's just all people who agree with each other. But the thing to remember is that even those really wonderful, talented people, when they sit down, they come up with those ideas. I think it's important to be humble and understand that you might not be the ones who have all the answers. And so one great thing to do, I think, is to figure out, once you have the lines of effort that you all agree to, is then there should be an effort to try to reach out and engage other people in the community who might have a passion for something that could maybe be one of your things that's the most helpful. And so one way to do that would be, for instance, being very specific about, say, offering grants. So you say, hey, we just don't want to give anyone money for anything. We want to give people money. If you have an idea that you can pitch to us and you tell us it supports one of our lines of effort, like, make us an offer we can't refuse, and educate people on what it is you're doing to solve the problem, and show them how there's the opportunities for their own good ideas to be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be pretty powerful, because once again, wicked problems are, no one person or one group can see it for what it truly is. And so trying to find ways to tap into the talent in your community, because the more people you're able to tap into, the more buy-in you get from more groups. And
Right.
I think that the more powerful the eventual solution can be, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We got a young man right here running the city of Newark who came in with a profile that scared a lot of his detractors,
Mhm.
but he came in with an engagement strategy that is fundamentally exactly what you're talking about, and has blown minds all over this country.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the part of Mayor Barack when he first came in, the business community was scared of him because of he has like bona fide black radical roots, right? His father, Mayor Baraka. So a lot of the business community was very scared of Mayor Baraka, but
Scared of what you
what
don't
he's
know.
right, and even the Republican governor, was like they seemed to be at odds. But within his first 4 years in office, he was able to get the business community to fully invest within the city of Newark, and like in his program, and investment is very high. And he was also able to get local control of the school system with a Republican governor who said pretty blatantly nasty things about him when he first got in office.
Mhm.
And I think, and part of it, I guess, maybe is part of that investment. It seems like what you're talking about isn't about the results of the strategy, but the process.
Yeah.
Like the process is the results.
And you
Yeah,
know,
I think that's a great encapsulation. Absolutely.
and Colonel, you know what I was saying? I would almost think of it as we gear up for Census 2020, and how important census is to everybody at one level, because census dictates for 10 years how we purchase
Allocate
things,
resources.
allocate resources, and how do we get everybody to buy in. The importance of filling out this document, that is a document that lasts for 10 years. And it means that, like you said, allocating resources, and everybody can't, as I always say as an elected official, everybody can't knock on everybody's door. So it means having a round table, so to speak, and bringing everybody to the table that represents a specific community, and figure out who can go here, who's going to go here, and how do we get everybody to understand that this is a living document, and that we need it, for a duration and a period of time to help us to be successful for that period of time. And how we prepare for it, it's almost like you come out of it and have to go back in to get ready to prepare for it. But of course, we don't prepare for it until a year before.
But how would you recommend like that problem with the census? How would you look at that?
You being me?
Yeah, like when Councilman brought up there's a problem with like the census, to getting people to understand how important the census is, and it seems like what you're talking about is a process. So what is the process that you would suggest?
And before you start, on real quick, because you as an educator, it means something to you when you're going to be looking at resources for your classes. For me, like simple as paving streets, the military for different equipment. It means something to all of us. So how do we get all of us to understand? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's really good context. It's a great example. Here's the thing with census. It's important to many different people for many different reasons, and so to me, this idea of establish some type of a collaborative group of a diverse group of stakeholders, and there's so many with the census that you clearly can't get all the stakeholders in the room, but you can get as diverse a group of stakeholders as possible, so that you can really have the broadest reach possible. And then if you're able to get these people to all meet by presenting them a compelling story of what the problem is. This is the problem we face, is the implications for funding for all of us for the next 10 years. How do we get the word out to make sure that it's as accurate as possible? We're all impacted. Let's figure out how we all do it together. And then and then with all those people in the room, that's when you then develop lines of effort. So there could be a communication line of effort. There could be, so that communication line of effort might have something to do with maybe there's some type of a news campaign through social media. That could be one thing. Maybe there's through newspapers, radio, TV, whatever, something like that. And then maybe there's something about the types of informal conversations that you want people to be having with, at like, maybe when principals say something before every sporting event or something like that, to put out the word or something, or at the beginning of every community meeting, maybe somebody says something almost along the same line, so you have unity of messaging and everybody's kind of saying the same thing about the census, even in many different settings. And then maybe there's another line of effort that other people come up with that has to do with say how to make sure that the census gets the right type of volunteers, like a diverse enough pool of volunteers to appeal to the community and to engender some level of trust. And in many different things like that. And so you come up with all those different lines of effort, figure out who owns which initiatives within them.
So basically, you're talking about like self-interest is everything. Like you have to find people who are directly impacted by the problem and have a real interest in solving it, even if they come, and especially if you can find diverse people with diverse interests who are severely impacted by the problem, who feel the problem and are motivated, and the problem motivates them to work together.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, because they're the ones who are going to put forth the effort, right?
No, buy-in.
And so,
Go ahead.
well, again, when I first heard this, right, that I thought about the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, because there is a problem of community violence within the city, and although violence has decreased within the city, it seems like there's always a thinking of, well, what can we do to prevent the spikes? Like there was a recent spate of violence in the city of Newark a few weeks ago, where it seemed like that weekend that multiple people were killed, right? Like, and there's always this panic, this remorse when those things happen. We have one of our members of the Newark Nonviolence Force was talking about all the counseling she was giving that particular weekend, and there's spikes and ebbs, but it seems like what the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition is searching for, what the mayor is searching for, we are looking for how do we decrease this in a way that is substantial and long term, and what are some of the things that, because it is a problem that is so complex. What does that look like from a military point of view? And I think that there's a
interdiction. I had to jump in.
What's interdiction?
Interdiction. The interrupting of the source of illegal gun trafficking into the community is huge, but it's the one that politicians, for some reason, I guess it's fear of the gun lobby, shy away from. But that's exactly.
But New Jersey and New York have some of the toughest gun laws. Like we incarcerate tons of people who.
This is undercover stuff. This is underground stuff, right? It requires a different kind of approach to policing. It requires a policing approach that has police forces that are engaged, that are clean police.
Okay.
Right?
Because there was a study that was done. There was a study that was done a few years ago that when the mayor was a councilman, and you always talk about that.
Right.
It's called the public health study.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And they found that a major source of gun traffic in Newark was through the police. The police would
corrupt
sell,
police officers.
Corrupt police officers were actually.
The black market is probably the biggest issue.
The underground market for guns.
Our kids have more access to guns than they do for food in some places. It's crazy.
So what I'm hearing from Zaid is literally what I have been referring to here as these lines of effort. Like I just heard like 3 or 4 what seem like very compelling lines of effort, all articulated pretty quickly, in sequence there. But those are the kinds of things that you get that you say, yeah, this is one of our lines of effort, and you go through and you articulate those, you get people to take ownership of moving each one forward, and whether it's the police department, whether it's the
clergy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Things like that. And Jonathan, I know you had a couple of great examples of some of the other stakeholders and what they might be doing when we talked about this specific issue. I can't, off the top of my head, remember what those were, but you had some other really, really neat ideas when we were talking. I don't know if you can remember them.
With the basic thing that always comes back to me from our conversation is that the process is everything. And it seems like the involvement of stakeholders to own results that they're invested in,
Right.
and diversity. It seems like self-interest and diversity, because we all have blind spots, and I know that you spoke really highly of that, right? Like,
you landed pretty good there, Mr. Teacher, man.
well, I mean, like, we had the conversation was we had a pretty intense conversation, and it was very thoughtful, right? Like, and one of the things that struck me is that when you were talking about how the military has a need for diverse people, right? Like, they need lots of different races and lots of different religions in the same room, having this lots of different languages in the same room, having a conversation and working on this problem together. Because without one or two pieces, everything could potentially fall apart, because you have enemies on the side who are not interested in, or you have blind spots where you're just offending the hell out of somebody who's not in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's important, I think, about that, once you recognize everything that you just said, one of the important things about when you have diverse people in the room and you agree on these, and you come to some common agreement on these, sometimes the discussion that gets you there, for instance, like this is probably a terrible example, and it might be a little oversimplification, but just to kind of make the point is, let's say you had the police in the room and they said, no, it's not the police's problem. You guys got it wrong, right? And it's really, this is the problem. And so there's a couple different groups that don't agree on what the problem is. Sometimes, even if it doesn't end up being a common line of effort that people agree that you should all pursue, the fact that you had that conversation has, maybe it's just not time to engage on that, because you could engage on it, but it wouldn't get you very far. You know what I mean? Because you can't get broad buy-in. So maybe it's but we had the conversation, that was good. Maybe we come back to it later, right?
Because no, you were saying.
Yeah. Well, it's just the whole idea of the process, right? Is you feel out where people, because the thing you're trying to get to with these lines of effort is you got to find ones that you think will make a lot of progress. Right. And at the end of the day, it might be wow, group A says, I really wish, we had this one line of effort, but no one agrees with us. There's not, and it's okay, well, it doesn't mean it's a bad line of effort, but maybe the group, that diverse group as a whole, isn't ready to put a lot of energy into it. And if you can't get a lot of energy behind it, it's got no chance of success. And the other thing is those lines of effort that you all agree to, let's say you got 5 of them, you might only get a lot of success on 3 of them. Mm-hmm. That's why you need 5, right? And that's why they all need to look good at the beginning, because and so as you go through the process of implementing them, the next step is coming up with a way that you all agree that you're going to keep tabs on them, mm-hmm. and try to understand if they're being successful or not. Mm. And as you see what's successful, you have to have some method of monitoring things for success. And as you see success, reinforcing success. And because these are complex problems you're dealing with, wicked problems, you don't know which ones are going to end up being the most successful. And it's in one example of this from the military side is, I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of press around at one point in Iraq. There was the surge, if you guys remember that term.
Yeah. Surge.
Right. Yeah, so,
and that was around 2006. There was a lot of a civil war in Iraq that resulted after U.S. occupation. Iraq was considered, quote, out of control with all of the violence between Sunni, Shia, and the United States military kind of caught in the middle because it was effectively an occupying force there.
Right, and so what's interesting is if you think back to the time, the person who was given all the credit for the surge was General David Petraeus, who is the commander in Iraq at the time, and obviously, and the surge did make a big difference in how it went about trying to really aggressively stop people who were up to no good from doing stuff, and also very aggressively trying to engage with community leaders and get them to be part of the solution. So it's and a lot can be said for whether it ended too soon, whether it went far enough. There's all those are all different discussions to have at other times. But the main thing about the surge as a strategy that was adopted and reinforced is that General Petraeus wasn't the guy who came up with that. Well, he was just sitting there, one night, thinking deep thoughts. He was going around and looking what all of his subordinate commanders were doing, trying to understand what they were doing and how successful they were being. He came across this one guy. He was like, "Wow, I love what you're doing. You're making a real difference. I'm going to take that, and we're all going to do it." And so, and that's just an example of if you're constantly monitoring your lines of effort, finding the ones that are becoming wildly successful, and then reinforcing that success, you can make a lot of headway. But that's why you need a very diverse group of people coming up with creative and different ideas, and then going forward on many different initiatives, or as many as you can manage, to try to make a difference in monitoring the success of each, because you don't know which ones are going to end up being the ones that really gain momentum.
Colonel, going back to what you're talking about, gun violence. It just makes me think, like you said, there's no consensus on the elected leadership, so to speak, to solve this problem. And we're looking at the campaign that came out of from Sandy Hook. And albeit people didn't like that PSA that came out, there was some consensus that got that PSA out. If they're not going to do their job, then let's just do it. And you've seen them do a commercial that started out somewhat innocently as buying school supplies, but the whole message is to teach the kid how to use the school supplies of weapons. If their school should be shot. Have you seen the PSA? Yeah. And I was like, but again, the elected leadership has not taken a stand to do anything. That these friends of Sandy Hook, they got up and said, well, if you're not going to do it, we're going to teach our kids to protect themselves, and put out that PSA. And everybody thought it was, if you look at the feedback, it was egregious, but like, well, maybe that's a reality. If I got to send them in there, But
I think that, in terms of gun violence in this, we're kind of wrapping this up, and I do want to kind of like sum up the takeaways.
I wanted to ask a totally different question that we were going to try to get into.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of just wrapping it up, in terms of gun violence, and it may not be like the PSA as in terms of solving the complex problem, but it may be one line is to do a lot of media work. Another line is to have a series of protests from kids across the country. Another line would be like, so if I'm an official, like if I'm an actual politician, then once I'm elected, then I would establish a team of people together who, like, I would get clergy, I would get students, I would get people who have a vested, teachers, educators, I would get gang members, people who were family survivors, people who might be on the other side. Right. I would try to get different people.
That's what we got going on in town. So
right. So I would get people on both sides of the law, right? Like together, and have those conversations to see if we can put these efforts together with people who would actually be responsible for it or take ownership of it. Because ultimately, when you're dealing with complex problems, they're complex because people are complex.
Right.
And the solutions are also going to be complex because people are complex.
That's right.
And what's important is the direct ownership over like doing anything with that problem. That's why the solution is really multi-pronged and will look different in every situation.
That's right.
Does that kind of sum up like what it is that you're talking about in terms of dealing with these complex problems? What these solutions would look like?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think that does a great job of summing it up. I think that's very well put. The one thing I'd add, I think that and it's kind of tough to talk about something as complex as complexity in a short period of time. But is I think going back to that advertisement that we were just talking about using school supplies as weapons. Well, that's a great example, I think, of and a great reminder that when you're trying to make positive headway on a complex problem, accept the fact that you're going to fail. It's just going to happen because it's a wicked problem. It is not easy, and as you address it, it morphs a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you fail or something, you're like, wow, that didn't work out as well as we thought. The next sentence is like, okay, that's great. So we've learned something.
Right.
What did we learn? And then how do we then morph with the morphing problem to be more to address it more effectively as we move forward from here? It's never like, well, that didn't work. Let's move on to the next thing. So I think it's an important mindset to understand that failure just means that you've learned something, not that was a waste of time or effort, because it probably wasn't.
So in terms of what I say in debate, you're either winning or learning. And like, it's not losing, you're winning or learning, because we learn from our losses. And so what you're talking about is ultimately the same thing. Don't give up, just understand that's a lesson that you've learned that will help you eventually move further.
You use a more eco-friendly language. We're talking about holistic responses to problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking at things holistically, as opposed to one way of doing things versus another way of doing things. Put everything on the table, and let's figure out what works best. Figure out how to work together.
As it's going on, as it's progressing.
Indeed.
All right. So we run out of time, and this is a great conversation. I always learn a lot when we talk. I appreciate you. I hope we get to work together again next summer. But we do have one question for you left. This is All Politics are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. So, who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group?
Let's see. Wow.
I know, I got you. Me too.
Sounds really funny coming from an Army colonel, but I am in fact a big fan of 50 Cent.
All right, you and Chris Randall. By the way, Chris Randall is one of our co-hosts. Chris Randall also worked with them over the summer and interviewed them over the summer.
I like Chris so much.
Right, and both of you were 50 Cent fans.
Oh my gosh.
And that's really cool that you being both a strategist, a military officer, and a 50 Cent fan.
In the club, huh?
Or the other, well, because 50 is a strategist, right?
Yes, he is.
Like, it's very much a
Well,
strategist.
Colonel, it was a pleasure. I have to tell you, in closing, did you get a chance to read Colin Powell's book, Life and Leadership?
I did.
Oh, that's one of the best books that I think that every military person should read. So,
Absolutely.
and I just want to wish you a happy Veterans Month and thank you for your service, sir.
Well, and thank you, Councilman, and thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for being on. Big round of applause for Colonel Jesse Morehouse. All right, so we will talk again. Thank you a lot, man.